There are minor spoilers in this video, although I do avoid talking about major plot points. AI Limit is a game where dirt is both food and a power source, where touching grass has become impossible due to the extinction of nearly all plant life, and where a maid outfit has similar protective properties to full plate armor. You play as Jane Limit, an amnesiac who is the epitome of I do not know who I am or why I'm here, all I know is I must kill. After receiving the mandate of heaven and escaping the Detroit sewage system, she must make her way through a ravaged world where the survivors fight for scraps as the sun sets on the species known as man, featuring the necromorphs from the Dead Space series. So grab your tastiest bucket of topsoil and begin charging your sink rate, because I'm going to tell you about the best Soulslike of 2025 that you missed. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't exactly have high hopes for this game going into it. After all, the last anime Souls-like I played left me deeply unsatisfied, and that memory was hard to shake. However, I'm glad I pushed past that. An AI Limit's strong opening helped a lot in drawing me in and overriding my preconceived notions. By the time the game had finally dropped its title, I was thoroughly hooked, and it was only uphill from here, both metaphorically and literally. By the way, if you enjoy my videos, be sure to subscribe. It's the most surefire way to tell John YouTube you want to see more of them in the future. AI Limit does an amazing job of introducing its mechanics one at a time and then slowly expanding them as you progress through the game. I feel like this causes the game to be deceptively simple at first because it doesn't immediately expose you to everything it has to offer, but believe me, it's there. It's just lurking beneath the surface, waiting for its turn to take the stage. You start with the tried and true Souls-like formula of the old reliable, the classic dodge and poke. But the next thing you know, you're racing through the landscape to find a good vantage point to cast railgun at an enemy before its AoE debuff causes you to take massive piercing damage. It's this depth that kept me thoroughly engaged throughout my time with the game, and what made me realize that Alright, so this is the inevitable part of the video where I compare it to Code Vein. Yeah, boo me all you want in the comments, but there is a lot to be gained in contrasting the two titles, I promise. Let's start with the features that Code Vein has that AI Limit doesn't: a character creator and multiplayer. This may already sound like AI Limit is off to a rocky start in this comparison, but I would argue that AI Limit doesn't have these features because it doesn't need them. In AI Limit, you play as an actual character instead of a self-insert for the player, and the game's story is about her journey as she makes her way through an unfamiliar world that is both harsh and unforgiving. That's not to say that there isn't character customization. The various unlockable armor sets in the game are, for the most part, side grades of each other, so unless you're running a hyper-specialized build, you can just pick the ones you like the most. On the topic of character builds, this is where I'm going to argue that AI Limit actually provides more freedom and flexibility than Code Vein. Some of you who are familiar with the modularity of Code Vein's blood code system may be wondering how this is even possible. After all, the blood code system is lauded for its flexibility compared to character building in other Souls-like titles. Well, for starters, the seals in AI Limit, which are not terribly unlike blood codes, can be freely swapped between at any branch, which is the game's equivalent of bonfires. Sub-seals, which grant powerful stat bonuses or even passive abilities, can be equipped to any main seal, and both main seals and sub-seals can be obtained primarily by exploration or by interacting with the game's various NPCs. There's no further cost needed to use them. Once you unlock them, you can freely mix and match as you see fit. This is a massive improvement over the blood code system, wherein you have to pay resources just to equip the various blood code abilities at all, and it's this lack of friction that makes the seal system superior for experimentation. Heck, later in the game you gain the ability to completely respec your character's skill points, something that is not only allowed, but actively encouraged by in-game lore tidbits. And you want to know the best part? You can do this at any branch for free, with no limits. This is now my gold standard for Souls-like character build systems. because you can experience any playstyle present within the game and better adapt to any situations you might be struggling with. Obtain a new weapon that has a cool ability you want to try, but it scales off of a different stat than the one you've been speccing into? No worries. One respec later, and you can actually try out that weapon instead of let it gather digital dust in your inventory for the rest of the game. Oh, and also, unlike Code Vein, there is more than one optimal build. In fact, AI Limit feels like the first Souls-like game I've played that manages to make a caster build a viable option without it being a hidden easy mode. Check this out. I'm not sure if this build still works because the spell has had some balance changes made to it since I did my playthrough, but I managed to figure out how to entirely cheese the first phase of this boss by figuring out how to abuse her stun windows. More than just character builds though, AI Limit has a key characteristic that Code Vein sorely lacks: cohesiveness. This is best exemplified through the design of the environment and the enemies. In Code Vein, I noted that unlocking new areas was counterintuitive and, at times, seemingly nonsensical. While each area was distinct, there wasn't much rhyme or reason to their sequence or themes. The same could be said of the monsters, which is where Code Vein's lack of cohesion really showed the most. Like, the underground area has these mosquito bug monster things because, they needed different enemies down here? Meanwhile, in AI Limit, the enemies not only fit their surroundings, but further add to the game's environmental storytelling. Heck, just by their visuals alone, you can tell which faction they belong to. Speaking of which, yeah, AI Limit has multiple factions present in its story. This is more than just set dressing, too. There are multiple areas where these factions skirmish with each other. It does wonders to add intrigue to the world of AI Limit. Like, if the necromorphs are beefing with the church, why does this pilgrim girl have a necromorph as a pet? While I won't be touching much on the specifics of the story of AI Limit in this review because I really do recommend you experience it for yourself, they do a great job of conveying the story not just through environmental storytelling and various items that you'll discover while exploring, but also through the light conversations you have with the various characters you'll encounter throughout the game as well. The more you discover, the more pieces of the puzzle you get until everything falls into place. The map design is also a treat, being varied from zone to zone while all still feeling like a part of one giant interconnected world. Oh my goodness, they even have a poison swamp. Going back to the enemy design, AI Limit does that thing where a boss will show up in a later area as an elite enemy, but while they are still a threat, they make sure that by the time they show back up, you are much stronger, so they are not nearly as punishing as their original boss encounter. But another crazy thing to me is that I noticed that a particular one of these bosses shared moves with a much later boss, which adds even more depth because not only are you being prepared for that fight much earlier in the game, but it also makes sense in the context of the game's lore. On the topic of the lore, while I wouldn't say that AI Limit does anything truly new, what it does do is blend together a number of topical sci-fi concepts in a unique way that I quite enjoyed. There are things in here that are entire stories on their own, and AI Limit manages to balance all of them together masterfully. Now, all of that having been said, AI Limit is not a perfect game. In fact, there is one glaring issue, and it's all contained within AI Limit's Parry Mechanic, called Counterfield, is something I wanted to be good so badly. You see, if you successfully parry, it both negates the oncoming attack and usually opens up a vulnerability window on an enemy, although some bosses require multiple successful parries in order for you to get it. If you master the Counterfield, you become practically untouchable as every attack against you gets returned to sender. Sounds pretty crazy, right? Try and guess how they balance this out. If you guessed, give it input lag, then you guessed correctly. Don't let the tutorial blurb fool you. You actually have to put up your Counterfield a fraction of a second before the attack would land, rather than at the last possible moment like this description suggests. This already makes the process of learning how to parry certain attacks downright infuriating, because it leads to situations where you'll hit the parry button only for your character to do literally nothing, and choose to block the attack with their face instead. But that's not all. Counterfield has a hitbox as well, which means some enemy attacks can just go right past it. This means you can get the timing right on something you've parried before, and it still won't parry. And as if all of that weren't bad enough, the game has no telegraph for when an attack can't be parried, unlike pretty much all other combat systems with a focus on parrying. All of this means that in practice, AI Limit's parry mechanic is frustratingly inconsistent, with no way to tell why a parry failed beyond figuring it out with raw trial and error. There were a bunch of fights that I would struggle with, until I abandoned trying to parry and instead opted for the classic dodge and poke strategy. But man, that hit of dopamine I got when a parry did work was so alluring that I kept trying right until the very end of the game to get good at parrying. If it didn't have input lag and the game told you which attacks were unparryable, it would be such a good mechanic. But alas, it's not. I'm being 100% serious when I say that this is AI Limit's biggest flaw, and the main reason why it doesn't get a perfect score from me. Even so, I cannot understate just how much I enjoyed the game. In fact, I think it's time to address the Silksong in the room and say something that some might find downright heretical. I want to be absolutely clear here. This is not rage bait. I genuinely enjoyed playing AI Limit more than Silksong, which is something I myself wouldn't have believed if you had told me this even a few months ago. In fact, I enjoyed AI Limit so much that not only did I do a full New Game Plus run, but it's one of the few games I've given the honor of actually going for 100% achievements. Meanwhile, I still have yet to finish Silksong because I keep having to take breaks from how rage-inducing some of its fights are. Now, I'm not saying that AI Limit is a better game than Silksong. Both are incredible games in their own right, and there's far too much subjectivity involved for either to be truly better than the other. But the fact remains that I enjoyed the challenges AI Limit presented to me far more than Silksong, which is why AI Limit is the best Souls-like of 2025 that you missed.